Hello and welcome to today's Movers and Shakers virtual event. My name is Simon Montgomery. I'm the Regional Director of Movers and Shakers. For those of you who are new to Movers and Shakers, welcome. We are the leading property networking forum in the UK. This year is our 25th year of delivering events and bringing together key players from both the public and private sectors. On to today. This lunchtime session is delivering more and better homes across the Southwest. Building new homes, achieving housing targets was a challenge even before the pandemic. How big a part will new ways of working play in the future prosperity of the housing market? How will the sector change? How is the Southwest going to kickstart and get back to growth? There are plenty of topics and questions that we need to cover off in our 1 hour today. And we have collated a fabulous panel for you. And without further ado, I'll introduce you to the panel. Stephen Lodge is the Executive Director of Development and Strategic Asset Management at Radian. Joe Davis, National Head of Planning, Development and Regeneration at Aberson Young. And Michael Auger, who is the Regional Director of Muse Developments. And today's session will be chaired by Anna Sabine, who is the Chief Executive of MPC. To kick things off, Stephen is presenting a keynote, talking about the changes coming and working together to create a collective advantage and step forward and move together in the marketplace. So I hope you all enjoy today's session. Without further ado, Stephen, over to you.
Thanks, Simon. Sorry, just hesitating while I'm mute. It's a really exciting week to be talking on this subject, actually. And all credit to Movers and Shakers for, quite frankly, impeccable timing of this morning's event, which I'll come on to. So well done. I'm Stephen Lodge. I'm the Executive Director of Development and Asset Management for Radian Group. We own and manage around 39,000 homes and assets, and we operate in the Southeast and the Southwest. We build around 1,000 new homes a year, spanning affordable and private tenures. Myself, I've worked in affordable housing, primarily in the Southwest now for just under 30 years. So, no sooner have we had a raft of fundamental planning reforms promised and announced, which I know have triggered some mixed views among many. We then received Robert Jenrick's speech on Tuesday of this week, confirming the release of £11.5 billion to fund the delivery of 180,000 new homes over the next 5 years. And with that, a commitment to 7.5 billion of that being available for development outside of London. And that's important. That's important because if we organise ourselves well, that means us. And then, as if that wasn't enough to tie our development and finance teams up in financial modelling, stress testing, and musing over the assumptions that might underpin a 10% first tranche shared ownership model, we're promised this week the launch of Homes England's Affordable Homes Programme prospectus. For those in the housing association sector, that's a much anticipated and awaited document, and might even have been issued actually while we've come onto air. So for the housing association sector, and I would argue the country as a whole, this week is feeling pretty good from the perspective of the opportunity for delivery of more homes and better quality homes. But the various elements of these announcements will understandably be received differently by the organisations that they affect. So housing associations will, I'm sure, be decidedly uncomfortable with the introduction of first homes. But no doubt we all welcome £11.5 billion worth of funding. Local authorities will, I'm sure, be struggling with the idea of an increase in the Section 106 threshold. And then developers might, and I make an assumption here, but be welcoming the proposed zonal planning system. I guess what I'm saying is it appears that there's something for everyone, but equally I'd suggest that compromise is needed. And it's that compromise that I'd like to focus on for the next couple of minutes, if I may. As a wider sector, we have differing drivers. They can be profit, they can be charitable objectives, or statutory obligations, and sometimes all of these. And I stress all of these are perfectly justified. They're all relevant, they all ensure that a need is met. But they also dictate how we approach the delivery of new homes, where we focus. And consequently, when our drivers conflict and when we lock horns, the outcome can be fewer new homes and lesser quality. So if we're truly to drive up delivery, to drive up quality, and to take advantage of the many opportunities presented by the recent announcement, then it feels to me that greater collaboration has to be the way forward. We have a raft of new measures and opportunities that are being made available to us, but because one size will never fit all, we of course won't like them all. And it feels to me that we need to look beyond any immediate frustrations and challenges for our own organisations, and we need to work together to maximise the opportunity for the South West. Increasingly, we're seeing many fantastic opportunities of collaboration. My own organisation has and is delivering through joint venture partnerships with local authorities and with developers. As a sector, we've witnessed some excellent examples and various different permutations of local authorities, developers and housing associations, all working together to derive their own outcomes from a joint effort, but importantly, to maximise the delivery of homes and communities collectively. Now is the time to build on that, to take partnership working further, to engage with the third sector and supported organisations, and to engage with local authorities to sustain their recent fantastic efforts of supporting the homeless off the streets, as well, of course, as creating partnerships with the private sector to share risks and skills and create thriving, sustainable communities, ultimately combining our strengths to drive up delivery. So I'd leave you with the following thoughts. Change is coming. The changes are designed to overarchingly support delivery and quality, not to support a single sector or an organisation. So if we are to maximise the benefits and opportunities for the South West and to drive up delivery and quality, it's incumbent on us all to work together for our mutual advantage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I'm going to jump in now, just while the rest of the panelists, get their videos and sound back on. And that was really interesting, Stephen, and we're going to come back to some of the points that you raised in your keynote. But you talked about changes coming. I mean, clearly the last 6 months, we were touching on this earlier, have seen a vast amount of change for most of us professionally and personally. And it'd be good to maybe start by just asking each of the panelists what that change looks like now. I'm aware a few months ago on panels I was asking people how COVID had affected their organisations, but I think this picture seems to change pretty regularly. So maybe I could start with Michael and what kind of change you're seeing at the moment, what you see the future looking like as we sit here now.
So sort of approach the future with cautious optimism, really. I think we've learnt, so at Muse we're a mixed use developer, so we're national, spread across the UK, but we've got a couple of significant projects in the southwest, and just about over half of what we do is in the residential sector. So we've got a good perspective on it, but I think since the dust settled on that first few months when we were all chaotically going around adjusting our working lives from a personal and business perspective, I think we've seen a lot of encouraging resilience in our business and across the various partnerships. We do a lot of joint venture work in what we do, particularly in affordable housing and build to rent, I guess sectors that by their nature are fairly counter-cyclical. And of course, the private housing market is perhaps exceeding everyone's expectations, and we're probably all wondering how long that might last. So I think the here and now is actually relatively positive. I think you know, look forward with cautious optimism, but there are some challenges clearly that we're facing. I think for us, it would be the robustness of our construction sector. I think, you know, things might get a little bit more difficult over the next 12 months, and I think that's something to really watch. Funding liquidity, Stephen's already talked about some big announcements and some more to come this week, but I think funding liquidity in the private and public arenas is a key issue. And also local government capacity. There's lots of opportunity out there. I think Stephen's right to focus on how we can collaborate to bring those things forward, but everything ultimately needs to go through the planning system, and a subject I'm sure we'll come back to is it resourced sufficiently to deliver what we're all aiming to do.
Yeah, particularly at a time when many councils facing potential bankruptcy next year, so not the ideal time for funding any of their offices. Yeah,
it's a really tough time for local government, of course.
Jo, I think the headline from Michael was cautious optimism. Cautious optimism from you, or?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the two things that's come out of Stephen and Michael, one's change and one's resilience. And my kind of first observation about change is the changes that we're talking about were changes which were in trail before COVID and are fundamental in terms of the resilience of the built environment and the resilience of the planning process. So for me, I think that change is inevitable, and I think we are quite resilient to the change that's taking place. So that's the first observation. I think it's really interesting what we're then talking about in terms of the local authorities and the amazing opportunities they've had now to help resolve it, and what we've seen over the last 6 months, but actually what's the next 6 months look like, you know, and when we're not going back to the office on the 1st of January, you know, I think so actually what we're looking to is to take that change that was already in place about agile working and accelerate that. So actually, instead of talking about what does the new world look like of going back to the office on the 1st of January, is what is agile working and how do we crystallize that to give it more resilience going forward. So that's my observation. But certainly in terms of what we're seeing in the sector is that we're seeing the planning system is pretty busy, and therefore if we're going into a different way of working, which we are, and we've got a different structure and different issues to challenges, the planning process and the implementation of that process has to change and has to be resilient. And that's the pieces that I think that I'd be looking for. And, you know, that the white paper and the various government guidance that come out is exactly what we were expecting, but we needed that without COVID. So I just think that what COVID's done is just accelerate something that was much needed for our system and for the built environment.
I think there's an interesting link between what Joe's just said and what Michael's just said on a very prosaic level, in that back to kind of local authority capacity. I feel like I spend a lot of my time when I'm on calls with clients who are talking to local authorities where the officers are trying to work from home with substandard broadband and can't seem to actually, you know, I was desperately listening to a transport consultant who couldn't make himself understood through his broadband at all, a transport officer, and you think, oh, if this is how agile working looks for local authorities, then I think we're going to have some problems just getting our applications through at all. Stephen, you sounded optimistic. Was that just because you were giving the keynote and you wanted to sound balanced, or are you genuinely feeling radiant, feeling positive about the next 6 months?
Well, having just missed half of what Joe said, I was just amused by your reference to substandard broadband, actually. So apologies for that. But yeah, I'd say I am cautiously optimistic. I mean, our business, of course, is a landlord, a community enabler, a contractor, a developer. We've got a number of different parts of the business, and during a pandemic like COVID, I guess there's certain parts are strengthening and certain parts are weakening at a time, and we have to just try and manage through those. But certainly in terms of development, I see that over the coming months, we're witnessing a spike in demand at the moment, supported by the SDLT holiday, of course. And I imagine that demand will remain. From our experience, the demand generally remains. It's the tenure that changes. So there's always a housing need, but demand for whichever tenure might change according to the market. So I guess one of the things that we'll need to do, and that we've referred to already, is that resilience. So making sure that we can turn to deliver the tenure that's needed, and having that agility built in to continue to supply homes, focus on quality, but at the same time meet that changing demand, whichever tenures particularly in need. For us, I think also the technology that's been referred to, I can imagine that fewer people will be working in offices. And therefore, actually, with home working, it's not just broadband. It's about the design of homes. It's about creating space, making sure that people have got areas to work from home, or even home working. We don't know what's coming. If we look ahead for the next 6 months, we're already seeing some local spikes and some local lockdowns. And of course, for organisations that are spanning different geographies, that's quite a lot to try and manage. It's almost easier when everybody locked down together and everybody didn't. But once you're trying to run a business where part isn't functioning and part is, actually that creates its own set of issues that we need to overcome. So yeah, a lot to wrestle with, but cautious optimism. We're really impressed with how the sector has come together, galvanised, and just delivered an amazing service to customers throughout the challenges we've had.
Well, I want to pick up on your point about collaboration, but before I do, I would just remind our attendees that there is a question and answer function at the bottom of your screen, and the session is only as useful for you as the questions you're asking. Oh, someone popped a question straight in just as I said that. That's fantastic. Thank you for the telepathy with the audience. So we're going to go through some questions from the audience as well. But I wanted to pick up on your point, Stephen, that was really interesting. But I'm going to throw it to someone else first. about how there's a massive opportunity, particularly in terms of funding for the Southwest, but it really requires collaboration between different organisations to kind of, secure that. Michael, from where you sit in the process, what kind of collaboration is working well? What more is needed? What isn't working? Just talk about this thing about how we work together as a sector to really promote the Southwest, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, for my mind, there's a couple of strands to this, really. If you look at the macro level, I guess collaboration is about the clarity of proposition for the region as a whole. So as a public sector or a private sector organisation looking to invest in the region, and as a national player doing that across the country, we're obviously looking at fundamentals of, in terms of land, infrastructure, policy, all the things that we need to be able to confidently make an investment. Is that proposition clear? And I think, and there may be others on the panel better qualified than me to talk about the ins and outs of it, but there's some challenges there, I think, with where the Southwest is with its policy making process and that clarity of overall proposition. So there's some collaboration needed at that macro level for me to improve that. I think collaborations at a more micro and scheme specific level, though, are working increasingly well industry wide. Stephen refers to some that the Radiant are clearly involved in, and so I think that's about it is about compromise. It's about clarity of purpose. It's about being open about what your drivers are. So in our own experiences in Bristol at Wapping Wharf, that's a joint venture we've got with a private landowner who, whilst operates in the property sector, didn't have the capital or experience to bring forward a scheme of that scale. We've been partnering with Sovereign Group in terms of the affordable housing element of the project, and importantly with Homes England as well, who've helped with funding on the scheme to bring it forward, because there were lots of abnormal costs. None of that unique, but just all the organisations coming together, talking openly about what they want out of it. And I think if you have a really clear dialogue, and everyone behaves sensibly, you can bring these things forward, and it's increasingly happening across the industry. So I think there's some really good examples of that, and I would just encourage everyone to think more broadly about the collaborations. Why not just, if you can do it on one site, let's grow those relationships to more than one scheme, and if those relationships are working, what more can we do with them?
Stephen, what were you thinking when you made that point? I mean, what were you hoping we might see in the South as encourage some of those government millions to come our way?
Well, essentially, the funding's been released this week, or announced this week. There's 7.5 billion, and we want to get more than our share of it, but there's conditions attached to that, and the government wants to see homes delivered. And the danger is that if we don't organise ourselves to actually have deliverable schemes that are ready to go, that meet a proven need, we won't be able to get our share of that funding, and it's a national point. It will go elsewhere. So I'd envisage working together in much the same way that Michael's just referenced. I kind of look at developments like Wapping Wharf, where we can bring different organisations together, whether it's local authority, developer, a housing association, and create scale. We can unlock potentially far greater numbers of homes for development. But equally, and going back to some of the things we've discussed around the recent months and the challenges of COVID, we can actually create much more sustainable, thriving communities. And I know Wapping Wharf very well, and the mixture there, the residential, but also the food and beverage, the other outlets that are there. Actually, it's a really vibrant place that's really accessible, and it's a destination place where people want to live. And actually starting to create those communities where actually if you are having to go through a kind of period of lockdown, it's not so challenging as if you've got facilities on your doorstep, if you've got places to go, views that within your 1 hour's exercise each day, etc. So I think actually working together and bringing together the ability to unlock larger sites, rather than what we've seen quite traditionally is certainly in housing delivery, smaller sites, Section 106s, etc. But housing associations and developers perhaps working independently and all quite blinkered and focused on their own part of the delivery, rather than thinking actually what set of skills do we each bring to the party, and what, if we work together, can we maximise in terms of the output? Certainly that's what we're doing. We've got a fantastic opportunity or development called Woodgate that's working fantastically there, 600 homes with community features.
Joe, clearly one of the big factors, I guess, one might be considering when making investment decisions is the kind of political will to deliver large-scale sites. And you and I touched earlier on the fact that the South West is not currently a shining beacon of cross-boundary cooperation between local authorities. We saw the failure of the JSP, we're seeing issues with the kind of greater Exeter spatial plan. Would you like to talk a little bit about what your take is on the South West in terms of maybe needing to do that a little bit better if we want to attract some serious investment?
Absolutely. Before I do that, I'd just like to pick up on the very point that Michael and Stephen have said, that actually, you know, we're always keen to not planning, but the planning system actually works relatively well, particularly in the locations and the things that Michael and Stephen were talking about there. That urban environment, that collaboration of urban sites and the communication that takes place between the local authorities, the statutory authority, the investors, the developers, the affordable housing and the community, that there's a good transparency and a good level of debate, not always to the right answer, but there's a good level of debate to make those things happen. I think the barrier to planning comes, and this comes back to Stephen's point really, is about that investment piece where actually you're looking at that bigger strategic piece. So actually that comes back down to the very heart of what the white paper is talking about. I think we're very good at the minutiae, getting the best out of those schemes, and those schemes can grow, as is Wapping Wharf is with those further phases. But it's that big piece which comes then back to your question about cross-boundary working and actually that strategic piece. And for me, I think that's what's really bold about the white paper, and that's what's exciting about the white paper, is that actually it's about changing that plan making piece. And it's that plan making piece, I think, that Stephen's referring to in terms of that level of investment that we're trying to capture from central government. It's actually, what are the investment tools that we need to get that growth of that level of that plan making piece? And that's why they're looking towards the zonal approach to planning rather than the kind of the local plan approach, which takes piecemeal allocations here and there and says, right, go on, get those done, but doesn't think about it from a spatial perspective. So for me, that's what is very exciting about the white paper. What we've got to ensure as the white paper takes its journey through to Royal Ascend is that it isn't compromised consistently by the consultations that come back in. That means that actually it doesn't have that really strong vision, which I think will help with what we're talking about, and would certainly help with the failings that we've seen in terms of the spatial plan and the implications that has in terms of the ability of the South West to deliver homes at pace.
Even, did you see the white paper coming down the track and think this is fantastic news as a developer, or is it kind of same old, same old? Do you see it being a significant change?
I see it being a significant change. I think it's proposing some fundamental changes, as I alluded to when I was talking earlier on. I think there's areas that are concerned, the proposed increase in the Section 106 threshold, etc. But actually, I think the zonal approach, personally, I think the zonal approach could actually give us that longer term view and enable us to plan better. And again, coming back to what I was saying earlier on, for me, and picking up on Joe's points, for me, those piecemeal developments, while they're great, they're not going to solve the housing crisis. And actually being able to have certainty of funding, like we've had this week, a clearer funding, a planning system that gives you a bit more long-term view for planning, that then enables us to invest in creating partnerships, to have that long-term view, and actually to create much bigger sustainable developments, to invest at scale really, which is going to have the greater impact.
We've got some questions coming in from the audience. There are two that are kind of linked in my mind, and I'm going to kick them to maybe Michael and then Joe. The first one is from Sarah Jenkinson. She says, you talk about collaboration being key. How do you think we can all collaborate better to particularly support local authorities in their services? The second, someone else who's anonymous has said, is there a need for house builders to change their behaviour and build trust with local authorities to ensure collaboration and get more homes built? I mean, I guess, Michael, particularly thinking with the South West and your South West authorities in mind, do you have any comments about kind of collaboration and support for local authorities and how house builders behave?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as an industry, I think we could do with better listening skills anyway, in terms of particularly at the moment where local government is and the challenges that they face. Talking to a number of people in local government, both officers and members, over the last few months, it's been quite interesting to listen to their comments on how they interface with our industry, and I think universally have a view that we do need to listen more and really understand what problems local authority faces, and what ultimately they see the private sector as a way to solve problems and meet challenges, and unless we fully empathise with that. So I think there's a broader point just about listening and really drilling down into each individual location and understanding what's really going on. I think sometimes we assume we know what the answers are too readily. I think in terms of the planning arena in particular, I mean, I see no, I mean, the government fundamentally have got to put more resource into this. I mean, one of the things that concerns me, and I likewise, like the panel members, I'm excited by some of the propositions in the white paper, particularly the longer term view that zoning might provide. But I do worry about how this radical reform is going to be delivered, let alone how the applications coming through still are going to be processed. And particularly, there seems to, if you move to a zoning system, there's going to be more emphasis, I guess, on consultation around the development of those new local plans, because a lot of the control is then that you would normally have in a consultation around an application, if that becomes less. So I think there's a real issue in terms of trust in the plan making process in our industry, in terms of how we consult on these things. Now, I think that was sort of an issue already, how we engage and build trust in terms of bringing schemes forward. So resourcing, yes, it's about people, yes, it's about skills, but I think it's also how are we going to do this quickly, because the housing need is now. These plans are going to take quite a few years to come through, and I think only if government, developers can do their bit, we can potentially, if we get the service back, we can potentially provide some resources to help planning departments do these things, but it only goes so far. I think it has to be much more centrally driven. But I think that whole consultation piece perhaps has been underestimated in how that's going to work, and how long that's going to, how much resource it takes to put these new local plans into place.
Yeah, and also whether authorities have the skill set required to carry out that kind of consultation.
I think that's a fair point.
On their local plans, they don't normally demonstrate the most exemplary public consultation ever.
Yeah, and it's putting much more emphasis on the consultation at that point in the process, I feel.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I mean,
Joe,
just to add on to that, I think one of the biggest challenges with consultation at the moment is it's not done collaboratively. So actually what you have is you have the developers or the landowners doing a consultation, and then the local authority. I think that actually one of the things, and that creates mistrust for the community that's trying to engage in it. I think I'm absolutely with Michael. I have a real concern about the level of consultation and the value of that consultation, the trust that's built up from that consultation. And I think it has to be with the developers and with the local planning authority. So there is actually a discussion for people to understand where there's points that can be stretched, where the challenges are, and what actually is trying to be achieved. But it is a real risk. And of course, the second point that Michael made, which is huge, is the transitional process here to this white paper being implemented, to this revised plan making process, is 2024. So that void in its own right gives such insecurity and mistrust during the very point where we've got to be out there delivering more homes, because that's the challenge that we've been facing for, well, ever since I've been in the planning process. We've been chasing this housing challenge. It's not new, and it's not COVID related. We just haven't been able to find a solution to it.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to ping the next question to Stephen. This is a question from John Everett, and he says, at a time when budgets and resources are limited, how will quality be measured and delivered? Will zonal planning and design mean bog standard? Any thoughts on that?
I'd like to think not, actually. I think going forward, we've, as I said before, or touched on before, I think through the recent months, we've witnessed the value of communities and actually enabling communities. And I think increasingly from those of us delivering affordable homes, actually, and looking, we have a long-term vested interest, we retain ownership, then we will absolutely be looking to create communities and we have a focus on quality, and inevitably through our funding, we're required to deliver that. But I think moreover, actually, when I think about the private sale and the homes for sale that we build and other developers, I think actually some of the learning and changing behaviours that come out of what's happened over the last few months, I think people are valuing the home more. We're all, or a number of us are joining you today from home. I think actually the emphasis on quality in the home, quality in terms of the surroundings, the amenity space, is actually going to drive the market, and it's going to be, well, it'd be foolish the developer that doesn't respond to that, because actually, there's a driver in there which is profit and sales. So I think the market will change, and we will change to respond to the market. Good question.
Do you also think there's a massive political emphasis? I mean, this government has long made a thing of the fact that everyone would like housing if it just looks nicer, and that certainly comes through the white paper for me. This idea that if we build beautiful communities, suddenly people will want them. And personally, I would dispute that, but I certainly think in response to John's question, the ambition is certainly not that zonal planning equals less nice quality developments. The government's hoping somehow they're going to help push up quality. I don't know if anyone has any comments on whether it's going to achieve that or.
So I just like to butt in there as a non-architect in an attempt to alienate all the architects that are on this call today. I think we've got to start from people. I come back to Stephen's point. It's about actually what is the function of the home, and does it matter if it doesn't look beautiful from the outside? It's does the space work? For me, that's what it's all about. Does that space work? Is that space constructed to dealing with creating a community that's resilient? And therefore that's really important, and then that gives a sense of civic pride to those people that live within it, and that creates a resilient community and a great community, and a place where people want to live. There was a whole discussion, wasn't it, about will modular housing look like a repetitive nature, but the terrace streets that we all live in have a repetitive nature, and actually they're loved because they work for people. So for me, I'm less precious about what it looks like, but it's how it functions and how it makes you feel. Yes,
good on you, Jo. I'm very sceptical about people being snooty about new build developments. I think lots of us live in new build developments, and we're not worried about what they look like. You've neatly mentioned modular construction, which is helpful because that's the question we have outstanding at the moment. Someone's asked us, is it time for the housing sector to really embrace modular construction? And this, as a non-builder, non-planner, this comes up again and again and again, and it seems to be MMC is this panacea to all our ills. Michael, is it time for the sector to really embrace it? What's your take?
So my view on this is undoubtedly yes, but I think it just needs to be regarded as part of the sector's toolkit, and an important part, but it's not a silver bullet. And I think there's a lot of focus on it, rightly, and we should certainly use the current climate as a further stimulus to embracing it, perhaps more than we have, albeit the industry, I think, is doing some really, really good things now with respect to MMC. But I don't think it should be regarded as a silver bullet. I think traditional construction will remain absolutely fundamental to the pace of housing delivery. So I don't think we should focus on MMC to the extent of overlooking the basic, more fundamental point that we just need more builders, however they build. We just need more builders. We need to upskill the construction sector, and we need to do more. I think government needs to do more to actually help the building product businesses that supply our industry ultimately. But MMC, certainly it's critical. We need to build at pace. We just talked about quality. And clearly there are clear advantages to achieving high quality through MMC. I think just from a Muse development note, and just personalising it for a moment, an observation that fully modular clearly is very relevant for housing, and I don't worry too much about the sort of monotony of what might appear. I think the improvements and focus in the industry on public realm and community will deal with a lot of that anyway. But I do think when it comes to, and we tend to do more urban, mid to higher rise flatted development as a business, I think a focus for us, and clearly there are fully modular examples of that out there in the industry, but I think a key focus that sometimes is overlooked is the sort of hybrid models, and increasing the use of hybrid models in apartment-based schemes, because I don't see fully modular becoming mainstream on more high density living. But I think we can go further than just doing bathroom pods and cladding panels and elements of mechanical and electrical kit made off site. I think we can do a lot more there, and certainly our aspiration and focus is in that sort of arena. So I think perhaps a difference between houses and sort of higher density urban living in terms of how they're delivered.
I want to come on and talk about West specifically, because I'm aware that everything we've said so far could pretty much apply across the country. Stephen and Michael, you both have developments across the country, not just in the Southwest. And Joe, you have a kind of national planning remit. I'd be keen to understand how we think the Southwest is perceived, what more we think it might need to do to attract investment. I know we kind of touched on it earlier, but we haven't really specifically talked about the Southwest in comparison to other areas you're working in and its maybe advantages and disadvantages at the moment. Stephen, do you want to pick up on that first? And then I'll maybe
just linking it to that question, actually, the MMC question, and if I can just answer the MMC question, the answer is absolutely yes, we should be doing more. In terms of the Southwest, and MMC, it's growing. I think there's a number of pilots and trial projects, etc., happening, and it's gradually expanding. But there's often this challenge, and I think Michael's just picked up on the whole modular volumetric challenge. It is actually a volumetric unit carries an awful lot of air on the back of a truck down some very difficult roads in the Southwest, which in schemes can become quite inaccessible. And I think where we've seen is a lot of the modular manufacturers have generally not located themselves in the Southwest. There are some, and there's some great ones emerging, but largely they tend to be in the kind of middle to north of the country. And that actually makes it, you start looking at some of the logistics and the inefficiencies. And it actually makes it quite difficult. So I think that there is a perception at the moment that maybe the Southwest isn't geared up for modular because we don't have the best infrastructure. But actually experience is that's not the case. If you can get a crane to site, so often you can normally get some form of pod to site. And I think, as Michael's already alluded to, there's the hybrids, panelized systems can be really successful. So I think there's more opportunity in the Southwest than the perception outside the Southwest gives it credit for. But equally, I think, also from my experience, I know there is much more ambition, and there's a real growing demand now to start moving into modular, not as an alternative, but to supplement traditional design and traditional construction, recognizing that we're going to run out of construction skills soon if we don't start recruiting or find a different way of building.
Joe, anything on someone that lives in the Southwest, either on modular or otherwise, about how the Southwest perceived, what more we should be doing?
Well, I think it's really interesting. As part of the work that we're doing nationally, we've developed an index that looks, and it's giving our clients an insight into the impacts of COVID and helping them to forecast what's happening in the various cities. And just if you just take Bristol, actually, the buzz that's around Bristol, certainly in terms of the food and drink, and I'd be really interested to see what Michael says. You know, when I walk down to Wapping Wharf, it's always busy, and that's a really positive sign. I think that, you know, Bristol is quite resourceful and very resilient during, I was going to say recession, but obviously, you know, these sorts of situations. So I think that it will cover itself off well. I think it comes back to Stephen's point, though. There's a lot of money coming out of the government to build more homes. There's a need to build those homes here, but actually you've got to have that high level strategy to get that investment into the area. That comes back to the challenges we have with regards to the housing growth that we need through the JSP and the speed that the JSP is now going to work. And for me, that's what we as a business community need to be focused on, because we need to ensure that we don't come behind the curve, because we haven't got that level of ambition or that clarity in terms of our policy moving forward.
Do you perceive, Joe, that the Southwest has a kind of worse reputation on that strategic planning than other areas of the country? And if so, do you know why we seem to not be able to get it together?
I think it comes down to, you know, it is political. I think we've got some challenges without question in terms of the way that it works. But I think also it comes down to this piece that we were talking about actually really getting down to what partnership is very early doors and setting a very detailed scheme about what's needed. And I think that maybe we're just not ambitious enough. You know, new homes and new investment and people coming to live in an area is not always a negative. It should be hugely embraced.
Michael, I was going to say, as part of this Walking Wharf promotional video, what do you think in terms of the Southwest and its opportunities and challenges compared to other bits of the country?
Yes, well, thank you for the kind words about Walking Wharf. Look, as someone who is part of a company that invests nationally, and just to give my response just a bit of context, if you divide the UK up into sort of 4 quarters as a business, we invest most heavily in the northwest and the southeast. But say we're part of 2 major projects in the southwest, Walking Wharf being one, and the other at Mill Bay down in Plymouth. So we've got a sort of reasonable perspective of the southwest as a whole, I guess. And the view of the southwest overall is extremely positive. I think that's industry-wide, but certainly it's our view. We'd love to be doing more and aspire to do more in the southwest. And I think that just comes back to fundamentals of a highly skilled population, a reputation, and a deserved reputation, because it's backed up by reality, just not sort of rhetoric for innovation across all sorts of industries that are well known. Quality of life factors, which are going to be increasingly important, sort of coming out of COVID. And I think improving connectivity, and we talked a little bit about infrastructure a minute ago, but I think Bristol is an area that has really promoted itself much better in recent years. It's certainly attracted our attention and hence our involvement there. And I think it's got its act together really well in promoting itself as a sort of mini city region, really. But it does come back to this, what I call sort of clarity of proposition. And I do think there, particularly perhaps somewhere like the Northwest, in terms of its joined upness and its ability to holistically package up a economic, social infrastructure funded with a more perhaps coherent planning system to support it proposition than perhaps the overall Southwest has been able to do to date. So I think, yeah, the Southwest got everything going for it. It perhaps still needs to work on its messaging, would be my perception. But you know, like many others, we think the region is a fantastic place to invest, and we want to do more. Interestingly, just a slightly different point to Stephen's about sort of MMC and sort of getting people down into the region and the capacity of the region. Again, traditional construction capacity, real big issue, I think, from a private sector perspective against other regions, sort of UK-wide perspective, again, not just how MMC could be used. You know, we're doing some pretty big things in our 2 schemes in the regions, and contract sizes are quite large. And, you know, the amount of contractors that can deliver schemes of that scale in the region is very low compared to others. So I think that's something that does need to be looked at. Okay,
thank you. I really enjoyed your point about perception of the Southwest. My colleague rang the cabinet member for planning of a major Southwest authority this week, and he was on his tractor when he took the call. And I thought that was very Southwest, absolutely classic. He was like, "I'll let you know when I get off the tractor." So
must have been his day off.
On our reputation management in the Southwest at the moment. We've got some more questions coming from the audience. Question for Joe. Wearing your national planning hat, where does the Southwest sit in its support for house building compared to other parts of the UK? Do you have a take on that?
Where does it sit? Sorry, I missed the last
bit. In terms of its support for house building, so where does the region sit in its? I mean, I guess the region has lots of different bits. It may vary massively across place to place.
I mean, I think without question, any house builder, pure house builder listening on this call would say that there is a much greater challenge in terms of delivering volume housing in the Southwest than there is elsewhere. I think it comes back to Michael's point. There are some propositions in terms of certainly the Northeast and the Northwest, where actually there's a much stronger message in terms of delivery and the importance of delivering those homes and the infrastructure that's backing it. So I think that is sometimes a challenge. I think that's the bottom line. I think we've got to address that. You know, I mean, the whole planning system's got to address that, though. You know, you look at, you'd never build a Milton Keynes in 2020. You know, there would never be the ambition or the joined upness of the councils to do that. So, you know, the whole green garden village community settlements pieces are being worked out. They are a challenge. They're a challenge across the country, but it feels particularly difficult in the Southwest.
Question that I'm going to start, well, the two kind of sustainability, climate changey related questions have come in, and I'm going to pitch them to Stephen first, just so he's ready. Firstly, does the house building sector need to step up and take sustainability more seriously? And how are developers addressing climate change? Stephen, do you want to tackle sustainability and climate change?
I'll give it a bash. Yes, certainly. So in terms of the house building industry, it's almost not dissimilar to my answer to earlier on. I think increasingly we're going to see demand from customers increase for sustainability measures. I think we're starting to see new homes come through that do have features, and actually the market is there. They're selling well. Certainly some of the private sale homes we're selling that have car charging points, etc. That's becoming a really popular feature that people are requesting. So I think going forward we will. I think if I can talk from my sector, you know, there's a big focus on my sector, the housing association sector, because the people we house often have less financial ability to pay bills, and we're looking at how we can invest in homes to enable people to afford to live in them. But equally mindful of our target of carbon neutral by 2050, and looking at how we can build new homes that meet that target, but also look at our existing portfolio to bring it up to those standards. And it's a real dilemma, but absolutely, you know, we have an obligation when you think of or imagine the output of homes in terms of gas boilers and just the sheer lack of sustainability that goes into traditional construction of homes. I think looking at it as a whole and strategically, thinking of MMC, thinking of changing the heat sources, thinking of the end user, actually the impact that has on society is massive. We've seen some great benefits from COVID in terms of lack of travel, those air quality readings that we've heard of through the lockdown period. I think all those things are things that we should try and latch onto, and I think a responsible organisation will be doing that and thinking, actually, what's the learning and how can we change this? So the answer is absolutely, yeah, we should be embracing it more going forward.
Michael, what's your take on that as the other developer on the panel?
Yeah, I actually think on this one, the industry's doing pretty well. I think there's a lot of good things out there. I mean, sustainability is a big subject, whether it's from waste recycling through to water conservation. Obviously energy use is a massive part of it, or embodied energy and materials and resourcing sustainable materials. We could talk for a long time about each of these bits, but I think if you stand back from it and look across the board, whether it's mixed use developers like us who are in the residential sector, housing associations, house builders, I think there's increasingly good things happening. I'm sure there is more that can be done. I think looking beyond all of that good stuff, getting to a zero carbon position, I think is the next big push. How's that really going to work in a mass produced way, so we don't slow down this pace of development that we need to address the shortfall in housing in the UK. There's something in there, I think, about viability, because some of this is going to cost money, certainly in the shorter term, before certain methods and systems of building and technology beds down. I think that's certainly one of the things that we've found trying out, whether it's, you know, biofuel, CHP, or air source heat pumps, or whatever, you know, PVs, whatever it might be, all sort of used around the industry, but they're all quite new still. Actually, it's quite scary how even some of the sort of experts in the field are still finding out about this stuff. So I think there is a period of bedding in for some of this technology that needs to happen. It just needs to settle down a bit, and then we can really push forward with it. At the minute, it all still, some of it from where I sit, still feels a bit new, bit misunderstood sometimes. But I do totally agree with the point that the customer, whether it's us as the public individuals, whether we're renting or buying, or institutional customers, be they housing associations or build-to-rent investors, are all becoming quite rightly more discerning on this. And that's, hopefully there's lots of pull from the industry, but there's quite a lot of push as well, and that's not a bad thing.
I've got two final quick questions, so I'm not going to ask everyone each question. We'll run over time. But the first question I wanted to ask, and I'm going to chuck it to Jo actually, because she's working across the country. There was a big panic about public engagement and public consultation when COVID first started. How would we ever get people to consult on things if we couldn't see them face to face? How are you finding clients embracing that or dealing with that? And are you seeing it as a problem going forwards?
Well, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I'm probably in the thick of maybe 4 or 5 that are exactly that. So consultations that are being done virtually. And I think that both the councils and the developers have really embraced and moved to virtual very, very quickly. I personally think that it is being very successful, because actually it allows you to ensure that the person who's interested in getting that information really has time to digest it properly and to ask questions directly in a private forum. And I think that can sometimes be very positive. I know if you are a lobbyist or you're opposed to a scheme, there's a different view on that. But certainly some of the schemes I'm working on, I'm getting maybe 10,000 plus hits on a website of people looking at information on big schemes. And I'd never get those number of people through the parish hall door. But again, it comes back to the point I made at the very beginning. Change was already going before we started these conversations. That change was already happening. What the pandemic has done is just accelerated it. And I think I just want to touch on the climate emergency piece, declaration. The real own goal, I think, for the government in making all of these changes is not making the stick bit. We've been talking about the carrot in terms of sustainability, but the stick bit would have been that if a council has an emergency climate crisis declaration and a series of measures in place as part of that, that should be judged in the planning process. At the moment, we've got local plans and policies for sustainability which are way behind what's being tried in terms of the ambition there. But yeah, that's what the planning process has tests you against.
Thank you for that, Jo. Final question, which is coming from someone in the audience. There was a point made about a shortage of skills in the Southwest. What should we be doing to encourage young people to come into the industry? I'll throw this out to anyone that has a view on it, or I'll pick someone if none of you volunteers. Stephen or Michael, maybe your employers in the Southwest?
Yeah, I think there's a need for more apprentices, more apprenticeships, both so from a purely development perspective and attracting people into our sector and training them up to develop and grow those skills. I think there's a real opportunity for traineeships and apprenticeships. I think into the construction sector, it's harder. It's a tough gig to attract young people into that sector now. It's going back to the kind of MMC versus traditional, and there will need to be a mixed economy, but actually working in a factory where it's safer, it's cleaner, you can perhaps manage COVID-friendly social distancing, it's actually that much tougher to appeal to the next generation. I'm not sure what it is we need to do to attract more people into the actual construction skills sector. I might defer and see if Michael has any views on that in particular.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say, construction, development, planning, I think the sector as a whole, I think we've got the ammo. I mean, we haven't got, if we're honest, we haven't got the best reputations when it comes to embracing new technology or diversity and things that happily are now changing and beginning to change at an increasing pace in our wider industry. But because of that change, it seems to me whenever we talk about sort of attracting more people into the industry, we've got the ammo here. I mean, I've been working in property development for nearly 25 years now. I can genuinely not think of a more exciting time, despite all the challenges we've got with COVID and sort of the economic climate. I mean, there is so much going on, be it in how we build, climate change, diversity, technology, the fundamental need for more homes, changes in the office sector, logistics sector, it all joins up ultimately. So I just think as an industry, do we really, I mean, it's the sort of your country needs you moment, isn't it? It's kind of, if there's the more compelling time to get the best talent to actually solve some real problems, for me, it comes back to problem solving. And young people out there with an aspiration to do good, and I think that the younger generation increasingly takes that seriously. You know, I think we've got a really strong pitch. How we're actually getting into schools, colleges, universities, across the whole breadth of the degree. It starts with apprenticeships right up to more sort of skilled roles. I just don't know if we're doing enough. I think the construction sector does pretty well, but it probably needs more resource. I think perhaps all of us in the industry need to do a bit more, to be honest, and perhaps spend a little bit of time going and actually telling people how great it is and what the scale of the challenge is, and come and be part of it. You know, I'll be honest, I don't think we perhaps, I certainly don't do enough of that. Perhaps if we all reflect on that, we could all do a bit more and spread the word.
2 20-second responses from me. The first response I would make is the only two things that have been in the media the whole of COVID is the NHS and nursing and the importance of the care industry and everything about place, you know, town centres, offices. So we are absolutely forefront of everyone's mind at the moment. If we as an industry don't capture that in terms of bringing those people through the industry now, it's a real missed opportunity. The second piece that we've not touched upon, and we all need to think about, is the impact of working virtually now about actually engaging with people and getting to apprenticeships and getting people in training and teaching, because that's something we've got to do differently. And I don't think anybody's really grasping or talking about that at the moment. And that's got to be our second key thing to do as an industry, without question.
Thank you very much, Jo. There's so many interesting things we could jump on, but I think we're almost out of time, and I'm fairly sure that Simon or someone from Movers and Shakers is going to want to jump back on and say goodbye to everyone. So on my behalf, I'm going to thank the panel. It's been really fantastic. Simon's back.
I'm back. Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that work. Thanks everybody. That was fascinating. So thank you, Anna, for chairing so wonderfully as per usual. Thank you to Jo, thank you to Stephen, and to Michael. Excellent contribution. I mean, goodness, we covered a lot there, didn't we? White papers, modular, traditional, investments, regional strategy, joint ventures, collaborations, planning processes. There was a lot of water under that bridge. And whilst we're on I've mentioned the planning process at the last point there. Just it might be really relevant. On kicking off in October, we've got 3 dedicated planning webinars. Obviously running through October, and on the proposed planning reforms. And the first one we're kicking off with is zonal planning, and we've actually got someone from New York City Department of Planning providing a contribution from that. So I think it'd be really fascinating, because obviously a lot of the focus in today on the topic that keeps recurring wherever you are in the country is planning. So that could be quite an interesting one. Thank you, Stephen, again for the keynote. We can't take credit for the timing of this breakfast. I know you said thank you very much for providing that. This has been a diary for ages, but I'm delighted the stars were aligned and it was good timing. But obviously it's exciting. You know, I think you mentioned 185,000 new homes, £7.5 billion worth of investment outside of London. Obviously that's really exciting. And I think if you look back at the beginning of lockdown, and genuinely, if you'd said this webinar, this session was going to be as positive as it has been, I kind of looked like I think everyone was in a bit of a downer at the beginning of lockdown anyway, weren't they? But actually, I think it's been really positive. It's been fascinating, and it's fascinating to hear about the views of the Southwest, and the high-level strategy has been absolutely critical. I think Jo made a fascinating point there, and to create the proposition to attract the high levels of investment, and getting that proposition right, so you can get the chunk that the Southwest needs and deserves out of that £7.5 billion is obviously absolutely critical. Whilst not forgetting the current challenges, there seems to be a high degree of optimism. There's obviously some successful ads with views, some obvious successful JVs, and again, a big theme was about those collaborations continuing and moving forward from obviously a strong base, I would say. So thank you very much. There's obviously a lot I could carry on summarising. I won't. I know you've all got things to do. But today's session will be in the future. Will be available on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. If you find the YouTube channel, please do have a look. There's loads of great content on there from previous sessions that we've hosted. So if you see something you think is relevant for a colleague, yourself, a friend, please forward that on. Because as I say, there is some great content in there. Very, very quickly, moving on to our next session, which is the 16th of October. October, and that's at 12:30 to 1:30. The title of that is Best in Class Asset Management, Looking to the Future. That is a virtual free event, and the panel individuals are Audrey Klein, who's head of fundraising for Kennedy Wilson Europe, Roloff Opperman, who's the managing director of Fifth Wall, and Richard Gerritsen, who is the regional director for Continental Europe for Yardi. This is actually the last in a series of events that Movers and Shakers have delivered with Yardi, and they've been excellent. So this is the last one. Then the day after, the 17th of September, again, the West Midlands is your thing, residential West Midlands, delivering more and better homes. So the same as this morning, but obviously with the West Midlands focus, that is on the 17th of September. So the planning sessions, the sessions that I've just mentioned, they are all on our website. So all the speakers' details and the details of those events, if you would like to investigate further, are on the Movers and Shakers website. I think that's enough for me. So thank you once again for joining us today. I do hope you have a wonderful Thursday and a wonderful Friday and a marvellous weekend. But thank you very much from the whole of the Movers and Shakers team, and take care, be safe, and we shall look forward to seeing you soon. Many thanks. Bye-bye.